Well, do you have all your circles sawn out? I do. One thing I noticed is that if I sawed in a counterclockwise direction and leaned my blade in toward the center of the circle, that I was able to saw up close to the ring and yet not cut into it on the top or the side. That's a little hint. I'll put that as a ticker across the bottom when you're at that point, because now it may be too late. You may have sawed them all out and that little tip won't help you. Now we're going to file. We do have some places to, even though if we sawed perfectly, there is going to be some places that we need to clean up. So I have this round file, and I'm just going to set my piece in there and just file up and down. Just look to see where you need file, where the file needs to go, the places you need to file. Look at the back, look at from all directions. You'll be able to see if that ring and back plate are flush, and just continue to file until all the pieces are filed fine. I have a tiny little grinder bit here that I'm going to go in there and just try to clean up some of my file marks. I'm going in from the back because I don't want to hit the tops of my rings. You could use any type of rough, coarse bit that you have just to clean that up a little bit. Okay. Now, like I said, this is just a little grinder bit, and it's way smaller than what it was. It came with my Fordham. I got, you know, often your Fordham will come with a set of little bits and things, but it was just a grinder bit, and it's a very coarse little type, kind of like a pumice stone grinder bit. So these are good to have when, you know, your file's very coarse and then you need something small, particularly to get in there. I will try to find that, put it in the product section. So now what we're going to do is I have taken my sanding disc and I have filed around a couple of these pieces, and I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to file some more, the rest of the pieces. Now you can get in close and you can file. If you need to, you can turn this when you pop it on with the other side down, and you can actually file this way if you need to, if it's more conducive to getting in those areas that you need. Also, we're going to file just along the back edge, just like that, to try to put a slight little bevel on that. We're going to clean up the back, we're going to file around the edges, and then we'll go on to the next step. I'm going to get a clean file thing though, because that one's a little bit worn. Now that was a 220 sandpaper grit. This one is a 320. I'm going to pop this off and put the 320 on there. And I'm just going to hit the back quickly where I sanded that down. And it's just going to take out some of the rougher bits from that sandpaper. And then we will go on to the next step. So now I have some little silicone sanding discs, and I want to just kind of get in there and touch up my rings just a little bit, and just kind of take care of the top. The sanding disc would be great for that, except that it's just too big to get into those places without sanding flat our granules, and we don't want to do that. Just the places where you may have a seam or a rough spot. Or even a tool mark. Okay, it's a good time to look at your tubes, the top of your tubes, to make sure that they're all even. This tube here, I don't know if it was cut wrong or if it bent when we fused it down. It's a little bit higher on this side. So I'm going to take my file and I'm just going to gently, this is the high side, so I'm going to gently file that down. Now since I've polished that up, I can tell if I hit this side. I don't want to hit that side if at all possible. You're not going to want to file a lot. Just look every so often if you've got a high side. And just gently take that down. Okay, I think I've just about got it. I'm going to put make two more passes. Okay. Now I'm going to go in there and I'm going to give them a good cleaning. I'm going to use my Dawn dish soap and my soft bristle brass brush. I'm going to clean them thoroughly because that's going to help me. Having them that clean, I'm going to be able to notice if there is anything that I need to polish more, if there's anything that I need to clean up more, sanding. I know that I am going to want to use my bristle brushes to go in there and really polish well, but before I do that, I want to give them a good cleaning to see if there's any nicks or anything that I need to file out or rough sand out prior to doing this. So I'm going to go in there and clean them, and then I'll be right back. Hi, well, I've cleaned up my pieces, and I did use the polishing wheels. We've done this before, so I'm not sure that it would benefit you for just to see me just run these over it. But we used such a high grit earlier that I would not go any coarser than the blue on these wheels because that is a 400. And honestly, you could probably get by with using those two polishing wheels unless you just really had some rough spots you felt that you needed to get out. But if I were you, I would just go ahead and go over it with the pink, the green, or the peach and the green, depending on which colors that you have. And then I did the back as well. When you're doing that, feel for any little rough spots. You may need to go back and take just a tiny little file or your sandpaper again. Just make sure that there's no rough edges that would catch on someone's clothing or skin or anything like that. But I have polished them again. Now another thing you'll want to do is you just want to make sure you go in between and all around, do the edges, and get them all polished up with your wheels. Now, we need to put some kind of a bail on our pendant, and I hadn't done that yet because I wasn't sure exactly what I thought would be best or what I wanted to do. And then I decided, well, I have several of these square wire rings here, and I think that would be just fine for a bail on this. You could go fancy. You could do round rings. You could do multiple square rings. If your ring was bigger, that one will only accommodate this one square ring. So whoops, that one must be fused. Whoops. How about we get one that's not fused? I think that would work much better. Awesome. So this one is already open. I'm just going to place him in there. I'm going to close him shut. Now he looks a little bit turned, so I'm going to grab him there and I'm going to try and straighten him out. And yes, that did work. But it did leave that end just a little bit wonky, so I'm going to straighten that out. Now I'm going to close the ends, make sure everything is lined up. So because that ring is a little wonky and I had to straighten it, I'm just going to take my saw and I'm going to saw through it a couple of times. That will help me get a flush seam there. And because this is a square square ring, I'm not even going to fuse or solder this one closed. I could, even if I wanted to change it later, I would just saw through it and take it off. I'm going to close it back up again, tight, and I'm going to saw through one more time. It's a little awkward having it already on the pendant. And I'm just going to kind of pinch it closed a little. And I'm sawing right on that seam. So that any slight bump or anything that might be keeping it from closing completely flush, I'm just making sure I'm sawing through it. And let's see again. Looking at it all directions, rubbing it back and forth. Remember the little trick of pinching it if you need to. Okay, now I'm going to take my sanding disc, not my sanding disc, my polishing disc, and I'm going to go ahead and run it over the top of that seam so it's nice and smooth, particularly because I'm not fusing it or soldering it. I want to make sure that there are no little sharp edges that will catch on clothing or scratch. We have almost reached the finish line. So I went ahead and I polished them with the bristles, got them to a high shine, and then what I did is I went ahead and added patina on one of the earrings. I want to add a little bit more and polish it again. But I love how the patina settled in the recesses, and it really sets off the pattern of the rings and the granulation and the tubes. Now, the way that I brushed this back was just simply with my brass brush and the Dawn dish soap. I did the patina, rinsed it off, and then I just gave it a good scrubbing. And I kept scrubbing it until I got as much patina off as I wanted. So I'm going to show you how I did that. It's just simply the black Max that we're used to. Just take that brush, and I'm just going to brush it on there. Now, try not to get it in your tubes. And you don't need to get it on the back because we're going to, I mean, I guess you could if you wanted to, but my goal is to go ahead and brush the back clean so it will look the same as the high polished places. Just kind of move it around, make sure that you haven't missed any spots. I love the way it settles into those recesses around. So now the next step is I'm going to go in there with a brass brush and I'm going to scrub it back. Now you will notice I have an earring wire on here. I wanted to just double check to make sure everything hung right and did right. This is the exact same earring wire style that we made for the hearts earring and pendant. So I like the way that it looks with that. So now I'm going to go in there, I'm going to give it a good scrubbing, and I'm going to be back. But then what I'm going to do is once I've added both earring wires and I've scrubbed everything back, I'm going to put it in the tumbler and let that bring it to a high shine before we set our stones. Okay, so there they are. They have the patina on and they have been brushed back with the steel brush and Dawn soap. It's very important that you use the Dawn soap because it's a lubricant, and if you don't have that lubricant, you can find that brass brush will leave brass residual on your silver jewelry, and you don't want the brass on there. I think they're stunning. I think they're absolutely beautiful. I am going to throw them in the tumbler now for a while. We do not necessarily need them to harden, so I'm not going to leave them in there an extensive period of time. But I do want to bring them to a high shine, so I'll probably leave them in there 45 minutes to an hour, and then as soon as I get them out, we will set the stones.